Is that workable?
Yep.
Okay. So thank you for having us back. If you rewind back to a couple of months ago, we came and gave you a very top line look at a project that the Economic Development Corporation at the county level had ventured into and able to give us more insight into the types of residents that are here in the county, with the idea that we can use this information to help hone various strategies related to workforce development and tourism. So we give you very top level, and the ask was, hey, the bill, this is interesting. Tell us how this specifically looks in New London. So that's what we've done, and that's what the document we have here in front of you provides for. It's a meaningful analysis, but there's always more data and more information. I tried to stop at a certain level so that you get enough to feel like you have a grasp of what's available. And if you have more questions, which you very well may, sometimes our answers lead to more questions, then we can certainly look at that as well.
I'm going to just jump in real quick here. That's the tourism and the workforce development stuff was really, when Bill and I started this, it was tourism. Over the years, we really truly believed that we could use this for workforce attraction, which is where we were headed for a number of years due to the demographic situation I've talked about a million times. But after last October, we had a workforce summit. The Waupaca School District superintendent pulled me aside and really started talking about something else, which I found interesting, which was utilizing marketing tools to reach out to try to attract students. And then we brought the city in. They started talking about trying to recruit people to the community. So we really have expanded that now to beyond not just those two audiences, but really to two more audiences, which includes schools and the city itself.
So I'm going to walk you through the top level of this detail. As I think some of you know, I fell in love with the sound of my own voice in the mid-90s, and we'll talk on and on about this. So if you have a question, just please holler. I will do my best to give you as much insight and background as I can, recognizing that you have a lengthy agenda and we don't want to hold you here too long in any one thing. So first is Claritas. This is the analysis that we did specifically for New London. The first page talks about our data collection process. We partnered with the county GIS team, and they were able to provide us essentially a list of every household in the county that is on the tax rolls. Not every property that's on the tax rolls is relevant to our analysis. Things like parking lots, for instance, or abandoned buildings or warehouses or any other sort of thing. So we removed everything from the rolls that was not a single family unit, or as close as we could get to a single family unit, because that's the level at which Claritas collects data on all of us. So it's, again, as a reminder, this is about households, not human beings. That's the data level that we have at the county, right? And that's the data level that we have for Claritas. Claritas, the PRISM lifestyle segmentation, we've got an extra slide in the local packet here because I wasn't sure how to show everybody this. Claritas takes every household in the United States and puts it into one of 68 unique categories. Each category or segment has individual identifiers based on your lifestyle choices and your likely purchase patterns for all sorts of things, from bubble gum to cars to houses to you name it. There's like the fact that there's a rodeo in Manawa shows up in some of our data and things too. So it's all about what decisions those households make, what radio stations they listen to, what TV programs they like, what magazines they read, for those that still read magazines, what websites they look at, all that information. So what you're seeing up there, if you turn the page here locally, those are the 10 most common, actually stay on the, go one back here in the cloud. What this page provides us with is a count of the 10 most common household types in all of Waupaca County. We're going to get to New London specifically in a second, but the county becomes the backdrop there. From left to right, the row labels, I'll come back to in a minute, but they each have these fun names like Country Strong, Big Sky Families. Behind each of those interesting titles, there's a 12 or 14 page dossier about the specifics of that household and what they're likely to do. The third column in is the count of those households in Waupaca County. We then compared that to the entire state of Wisconsin as our cohort. And then the final column there is the percentage of that household in the state of Wisconsin. Now it gets a little confusing, but we want to know who's here and we want to know who is also in the state. And when we use that to compare and contrast and to determine a certain amount of affinity for Waupaca County and its various lifestyle habits. But back to that first row, that row labels, one key quick read thing in all this data, there are 68 total possible households. They are ranked 1 to 68 based on socioeconomic status. 1 is the most affluent, 68 is the lowest socioeconomic from the standpoint of resources. So when you, many times when you look at charts going forward, I don't use the fun name to call out a segment. I say, oh, that's a 14 or that's an 11, which corresponds to the fun name, but from the standpoint of how you think about it, if it's, you know, a 1 or a 2 or 3, that means that's a highly affluent household. If it's a 56 or a 62, we know that they have far fewer resources. Clear as mud? All right. Then, next slide. Now we're going to go specifically and look at New London. Now, here's the interesting fact, which you guys live with. What this data shows, of course, you have the county, and then as you well know, you straddle 2 counties, and your school district also straddles 2 counties, which is not uncommon for school districts. Where our data ends, though, is the blue Waupaca quasi-rectangle. We're essentially blind. Once we take a step over the county line with this data, we lose that opportunity. So when we look at this, we also want to recognize that while there's, I think, very, very important data here, it is not literally the entire picture of your city.
I think the school district, actually 3 counties, right, Scott? Right. Yeah. So a little bit into Winnebago and Outagamie. The only thing I'll say about that is the areas that the city is in and the school district is in those areas really don't look all that much different than Waupaca County. I mean, it's not like you're in the Fox Valley or in the Oshkosh area. You're still in the rural area.
Okay, next slide. This gives us specific to any household that the county identifies for tax purposes as belonging to New London. This is the count of those households. So you just keep that in mind. We'll come back, like, because you share, you know, you rub up against a couple of townships, right? And you have relationships with those. Recognize that if you take 1 foot step over into the township to the west, you're not in this count. So again, I like, just for clarity there, the number 1 common household in the New London data is a number 51, Campers in Camo. Again, kind of fun names. There are 330 of them, and it represents 16.61% of all households in New London. Now, for purposes of our time here, I won't go into great detail, but 51s, town and rural mix, lower mid-class, younger family mix, some college, mostly owners. That's homes, by the way. Below average IPA, which is not a beer, sadly. It's income producing assets. It's something they use for the banking side of this. And then a below average tech. Owns a Lincoln, eats at Little Caesars. You guys know where there's a Little Caesars around here? Yeah. Sometimes it's scary. Shops at Walmart, watches Nickelodeon, follows Grand Prix Auto, stays at a Quality Inn, and listens to New Country. So very high level, right? But that is right now the most common of all the segments you have here in New London. The second most common are the Golden Ponds and the Hometown Retireds, 58 and 38 respectively, both about 13% of your makeup. Golden Ponds are what they sound like. Both of these households are into retirement and are clearly empty nesters. One is more affluent than the other. Golden Ponds, number 58. So remember, 68 is the lowest socioeconomic status. That's 58. And then 38 are hometown retireds. And again, as time goes on, I'm happy to give you deeper dives into all of these. But what we're seeing here is some clear patterns as to the resources and socioeconomic status of key areas of the city and the folks who live there. And then so on and so forth. We see the remaining, I believe there's 16 on this page. 99 will come up occasionally in the data. That means unassigned. All that means is that there was not enough of a footprint for that household for Claritas to accurately put them in one of the 68 categories. So I did the top 15 plus the unassigned here. I think there's 16 total on this page. All right, make sense? All right, let's go to the next slide. So back to the county at large. When we get this data, one of the analyses that we run is something called the Gameplan Grid. And what this does for us is it points us towards the type of households that we should target whenever there's a question of persuasion or purchase or decision making. All of these get put into the 4 quadrants of retain, recruit, niche, and attract. And I'll give you a little brief overview of what the different quadrants mean. But essentially on the x-axis, that's on the left, the index goes from 0 to 400. That measures an affinity for Wapaka County. 100, and that's where the line is there between the colors, at 100, a household is no more or less likely to have an affinity for Wapaka County than any other household in America. So it's average. If you go to 200, so kind of mid-level on our chart, that indicates that any of those dots there, they are twice as likely as the average household to have an affinity for Wapaka County and what Wapaka County has to offer. You go all the way up to the very tippy top of the chart, you get 400. We don't have anybody up there, but if you did, they would be 4 times as likely as the average household in the America to have an affinity for Wapaka County. The bottom, the y-axis starts there, and that is the percentage of that household type for the state. Because we want to know really 2 things about a potential recruit for whether it's a school district, a town, whatever it might be. We want to know how much do we think they're a match, and then how many of them are there? Because somebody can be a really great match, and there's so few of them that it doesn't make economic sense to go out and try to recruit them. So we want, in a perfect world, we want lots of people. We want people like us a lot, and then we want lots of those people. And that's what the y-axis provides us for. 0 to 6%, far right 6%. Again, that's Wisconsin population. So if you go up to the corner, there's number 44. If you go up, all right, number 44 is, it indexes just over 250. And there's almost 5.5% of the state population fall into that number 44 category, all households in Wisconsin. So what that would tell us, and why the whole recruit green square is there, is those are all households that there are plentiful in Wisconsin, and that we have reason to believe that they would have an affinity for Wapaka County lifestyles. So anything that's in that recruit segment, that those become real opportunities in the eyes of a marketer to say, wow, we have reason to believe that they're going to really like us. And there are lots of them throughout the state to potentially recruit to come here. This may be worth our resources. Make sense? All right. So next slide. Just kind of explains everything I just said in more detail. I'm going to skip over the rest of the detail for you to the next slide here. Now we're back to most common households in New London. And what we've done is color coded. Remember the game plan grid with the 4 quadrants and the 4 colors? What we did is we color coded our New London's most popular segments, whether they were a recruit, a retain, a attract, or a niche, right? So what we are looking for are the possibility of patterns to say, all right, where could we be more successful? Where are the holes we could fill? Meaning 1, where are there absences that maybe we could do better with? And then 2, where are there already successes of which we could build onto? So that comes in really 2 forms here. The first is you have yet another color coding. I apologize, but one important aspect of this are kids and no kids, especially as you look towards informing any sort of development or something of that nature. Presence of children is a big factor when it comes to household type and choice. So we broke a little bit of that out as well. So you'll see, again, there are those golden ponds, number 58, hometown retireds, number 38. Those are both, they clearly have an affinity for Wapaka County. They have an affinity for New London, and you could most likely see those as a possible group to attract. But the more interesting part of that is not who you're necessarily doing well with, it's who you're not doing well with that I want to point your attention to. Now, if you remember in our quadrant, the greens, the recruits, those are your prime targets because there's lots of them and they should like us based on what we know in the data. Campers and camos, that one we started off with, and I read the little description at the Caesars, they're number 1, right? So they're in that category. So resources that they would potentially like would be interesting to talk about. And if you look at many of the videos that we've produced in the past, related to the parks and some of the amenities around here, they kind of fit into that category, things those folks might take advantage of, especially around the Wolf River, things of that nature. But I want to take your attention to the very bottom, 27 and 28. These are Big Sky families and country casuals. These are some of the top overall county, from Wapaka standpoint, most popular, most common households in all of Wapaka County. And they're at 27 and 28, they're reasonably affluent. They're kind of in the top half of that. And they're heavy consumers of all sorts of things from groceries because they're growing families typically. So we see that, but not always. Country casuals are a little bit older and tend to have some more empty nesters. Either way, in the city data, there is exactly 1 household in each of those categories in all of New London in the city data, which sees as so that's a big shift from what Wapaka County is successful with. Now, in the parentheses, I took the adjacent townships and pulled their data out, and they have 351 Big Sky families in the 2 townships and 248 country casuals. So it seems like that's kind of where they've settled. And the numbers in the parentheses are for the entire county. So in the case of Big Sky families, 10% of those are kind of in the area, but only 1 of them is literally within the city data. So when we do the analysis, we not only look to tell you what's there, we look to tell you maybe what's not there. And that was a fairly big hole in comparison to others, and an area, frankly, that is really healthy for growth, both for municipalities, for tax base, for schools, because they typically have a presence of children, at least the Big Sky families, and they're heavy consumers of everything from gasoline to sporting equipment and everything down the line. They're a very vibrant segment. So Wapaka County does well with them. It looks like New London, the city, has lots of resources that point to, boy, you'd think that they would do better with them. But for whatever reason, we're losing out to the townships to the west, essentially, they're getting those. And,
That's where they're living.
right.
They're coming here to do a lot.
Yeah,
of-
they're driving their boat.
They're doing a lot of stuff here, but they're not living here. They're living outside of the city limits. And that's, if we look at Wapaka, we're gonna find the same thing, though. I would dare to say that Wapaka is gonna have more than one living inside their city. But they're gonna have a similar thing where a lot of the people that are in these categories are living in the townships around the city.
Once you go to the next slide, I think it helps visualize some of this. So again, same data as you just saw here, but back on that game plan grid, and you can see where those same highlighted segments fall visually on that grid. And again, when you look into the green, those are the ones where, wow, there's lots of them in the state and they should really like us. What can we tell them about our area to get credit for what we do here, to have them consider moving here? So as a resident recruitment example, so you've got people driving to the industrial park every morning. I'm guessing if I stood out at the corner of Highway 15 and 45 at 6 in the morning, I would see a steady stream of vehicles coming from the Fox cities.
They're actually going both ways, but
Right? Well, we want them coming and staying, right?
There's a steady stream coming here. Yeah.
So the opportunity would be to partner with large employers at some level and identify that, boy, there's a lot of cars in your parking lot that might really enjoy and be a great fit to live in our community instead of simply working in our community. And this data would help you identify who those folks are and what do they need to know about New London that would really connect with them to help them understand. Because recognizing this is not an impulse decision. If we were selling bubble gum or tennis shoes or bananas or anything, else, we would work a little somewhat differently with the same theories. Recognize this is not a one-time solution or one-time persuasion. It's going to have to be a series of events. But there's a great group of people who are good employees here in the New London area who we want to give them every opportunity to be residents in the New London area. So that's one way you can use this data to point to, wow, if you've got people who are 28s or 27s and they're working, let's help them understand the value. Flip that coin over and I'm going to point you down to the attract part. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, did you say that there was a specific township or municipality that the Big Sky Families and County Casuals, are those numbers coming out of a specific area?
Yes, those are the two townships, and you know what? I did not write them. What are directly to the west?
Probably Lebanon and Mukwa.
Buffalo and Lebanon.
Makwa and
Thank you.
Lebanon.
Yes, and I can break the data out by all the townships as well.
And I think we all know that if we went to the other two townships, there's going to be some similar data there too.
Yeah, I would just think, because I used to live in the city of New London and I wanted more land, so I moved out to Makwa.
Yeah.
So I think there's,
So we don't have Outagamie County's data, but we look at Liberty and Ortonia, we're going to find similar data.
So to your point, let's flip that coin over and say, all right, let's say for the sake of argument, we can't give those 27s and 28s what they want. You just don't have 2-acre parcels in the heart of the city. They don't exist. That's where you get into the attract part of this. And what that essentially means is right now, whatever they're seeing about New London, or in particular Wapaka County, these folks aren't seeing a match. Whatever resources are there, whatever lifestyle they perceive to be there, they're not seeing as a match for themselves. But 2% of the state population includes things, the people are like 31s and 9s, for instance. Those are those two right at the bottom. This is where you could get into economic and community development. Is there something you could create here or supplement or augment or maybe get more credit for, or that's a hidden gem that you could take out to those folks who might reevaluate the move? And again, one of the lowest hanging fruit are those folks who are driving here and employed in New London. That might be a really good fit if they knew about X, Y, Z. Or now we have a development that fits these specific needs, and that's really attractive to them, whatever their specific needs might be. But the idea of attracting is that you have to, it's the old build it and they will come kind of mentality. You see this on a larger scale right now in Green Bay with Titletown Tech. There's modest technical whatever in Northeast Wisconsin. They, built this amazing facility and got all these things, and they created this opportunity out of nothing. And now it's being considered as a destination that may have not been before. Now, this takes enormous resources.
They had the Packers and Microsoft helping out.
Yeah, that does tend to make a difference. And I use an over-the-top example with hyperbole, because I guess to relate that, this is not a modest ask. If you look at someone, you want to go into the attract side of it, you have to do something very special in order to change those people's perceptions. And it takes an enormous amount of resources and time, and not impossible. But as a marketer, I am trained to take low-hanging fruit first. And low-hanging fruit does, ironically in the chart, doesn't hang low. It's up high in these quadrants. So like the 51, the campers in camo, any kind of resource that you bring in, you've already got folks who enjoy that lifestyle, who align with it. Maybe they just need to know more about it. And again, that's a lot of what we've been doing with the video program, is getting you credit for that with other like-minded people. Where we get into workforce development or in community recruitment is connecting those dots for people who already have a relationship with New London. Can they be persuaded over time to make another level of engagement in New London with the school district, with building here? Many of with school choice, parents have options for schools. And certainly New London has a ton to offer within their school system. So you've got great resources to work with. It's really a function of prioritizing who might be the target of the message, and then what those messages would be.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The 31 and the 9, is there data that would tell us what kind of housing or what attracts that particular type of household?
The short answer is yes. When it comes to housing, Claritas has basically 3 categories that they look at: renters, owners, and then householders. So renter is what it sounds like, right? Owners includes things like condominiums or shared properties, but not renters. And then households are, the traditional one-family home kind of scenario with a picket fence and a driveway, 2-car garage. So there is data on that, the propensity of those for that, for each of these 68. Now, I just caution you a little bit on that. As we get into some of those individual segments, data is very telling. As we get deeper into the weeds on some of those, I would look for, rather than any specific instance of like, oh, okay, well, these folks are householders or condo dwellers or whatever it might be, Claritas is going to give you likelihood and propensity. It's not going to tell you 100, there is no 100%, right? So you want to start looking for patterns, and the patterns help guide you. When we get down into the unique individual subsegment, and we only look at that one little subsegment, you don't get the pattern recognition that you do when you consider it at a little higher level. So the data is there, the data is informative, but I would not necessarily bet my house on what whether they're going to rent or whether it be an owner or a householder at that level for a single segment. That's a long answer to a short question. I'm good at that. So did that answer what you're looking for?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? I thank you for your patience and hanging in there. This is fairly complex, and I did my best to color code things But that being said, maybe you wake up in the middle of the night with a burning question. Just let me, you can find me, track me down. Knows how to get a hold of me. Dave, did I miss anything that you wanted to add?
No, I guess I'm just curious as to, with the committee, what your thoughts are about this information and how it relates to the development that you've been working on across the river.
Good question.
Maybe you need to think about that for a
Yeah.
while.
As I understand what you've been trying to tell us there, Bill, so we have identified here some recruits, like 27, that possess certain characteristics that we can go after or whatever. And so we take a closer look at 27, for example, and say they like to go to Pizza Hut or whatever. And maybe we can zero in on that we do a bunch of advertising now through Pizza Hut or something along those lines, that we try to attract those people to New London.
Yes, you can read the tea leaves essentially based on their lifestyle preferences. So like, for example, I would tell you that based on what I've seen for the New London specific households, that if I sold Buicks, I would be very happy, because turns out that people who fall into some of your most popular categories, that's the Golden Ponds and the other homestead retirees, they buy Buicks, according to the data. So you can absolutely triangulate it there and learn more about that. You can also inform one of the things that people in New London, again, as you dig a little bit deeper, one more little nugget I saw is they really like to go out to what Claritas calls casual dining. So that would be like TGI Fridays, Cracker Barrel, kind of that sort of sit down, not QSR, quick serve like McDonald's, that kind of stuff. It's, and it's not fine dining, it's casual dining. It's kind of in the middle. And it makes sense, if you are a retired couple with no kids and you make your own schedule, you'd probably go out to eat more often. Anyway, so there are really good nuggets as you dig in deeper there that can help point to whether some aspects of development would be prioritized or deprioritized. That being said, though, I will say, like, in nowhere does this point to something as unique and successful as Water Street Vintage, right? So sometimes entrepreneurship trumps data, right? Yet you have this data at your disposal, not to necessarily rule things in or out, but to inform your own decisions. That's why you live here. That's why you're on this committee, because you know this community. This data just gives you one more dimension to help make decisions.
And I guess what I'm actually trying to get at is, if you look at the recruit side of the last page, the 27s and 28s have a strong affinity for this area, but they're not living in the city. So if you want 27s and 28s on that piece of property, what do you got to do to get them there? Otherwise, you're probably looking at 50s and high 40s. Those are the people with high affinities for the city and would probably be interested in living on that piece of property. So I guess that was my point, is to think about who do you think is going to want to live on that piece of property, and what would you be trying to do there, depending on, who you're trying to go after. Maybe the 27s and 28s don't want to be there because they want an acre or 2 acres. Doesn't matter what you do, they're not coming.
Right.
Maybe they will if you build high-end condos, and that's what the older country casual crowd would consider. But that's kind of what we're trying to point out here a little bit with this data, to help you think a little bit about that piece of property and what the realistic possibilities are for you.
Dave, it's Judy. Where would we get an explanation of all these numbers? I didn't see it unless it's in the presentation.
No, great question. It's a 400-page document, so I took pity on everybody who didn't send it over. I'm going to leave here with you. This is, I don't know if you can see this. This breaks out the clusters, kind of a post. It's a poster type thing, but gives you a very top level component. I'm happy to provide any part of that 400-page document. If you point to, hey, I want to know about 12s, 13s, 85, whatever it might be, we can get you all of that. At some point, the mountain of data just becomes just that. So if I can guide you through it in two specific things that are going to be the most meaningful to your discussion, that's there. That being said, some of the top level information is available widely on the internet. Claritas partners with all sorts of folks across industries, and even a simple search for some of the funny names in here. Like if you do a Google search for what was the country strong or country casuals, you'll get little pieces of data. And even on the Claritas website, they will give you a certain level of data for free if you sign up and let them email you their propaganda, as is so much with white papers and whatever on the internet. So I'll leave this and I'll put that offer out there. You tell me what numbers you want and I will make sure you get it.
Well, I think for sure it would be just the numbers that are on that grid, but then they can choose whatever ones that seem most important to them.
Yes, that would be, and honestly, I would advise you to start with 3. Because those documents, like I said, are 12 pages a piece. So just know that every time you point at a number, you're pointing at 12 pages worth of data, and that can get mind numbing after a while. So maybe 3, 5 at the most. And I mean, I'm not going anywhere and neither is the data. So as you get deeper into it, just let us know.
That's the
Thank you.
data we bought with the $6,000 when we did this project.
If somebody really wanted the full 400 pages, somebody like me, would I be able to request it?
Who is me?
Hans Thompson. He's on the committee.
Could you email it? Is it electronic form?
Is it possible? Yes. Now, what I need to check with the licensing with Claritas is they tend not to ask you to dump out the entire toolbox to the public willy-nilly. So let me start with the data that you want, and I will check our licensing agreement. I know that I can do onesie twosies without question. What I don't know is if I can just turn over the entire document with everything that's I mean, there's information there that's doesn't even show up in Wapaka County, in all honesty. So I'll check.
Thank you.
Other questions for Bill? All right, very good. Thank you very much.
Always good to see you.
Very good overview.
Thank you.
Gives us something to think about, I think.
Thank you.
Here, I'll leave you with this parting gift, as they say.
Okay. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda then, Todd?
Hello.
So I guess I'll just start this off. Todd and I had a conversation last night to kind of see, where are we going next with all this stuff and everything. First of all, we talked about his last final report that he provided, and that was presented at the last meeting. We kind of reviewed just to make sure that all the I's were dotted, T's were crossed, with the requirements of the agreement. And I kind of went through this final report again, and again, he had it set up with all the different asks with the agreement and the responses to that. And then at the end, we talked about where are we going forward? What are we going to ask for Todd in the future? Where are we going to go with the project? And I went back and I reviewed his, the bottom here, he's got the next steps in his report. And we've started some of these next steps for the riverfront property. Number one, he recommended, we got to determine what we're going to do with the library on the property. And obviously the library's come back and said they're changing gears for what they're thinking of going with the property. So, we could put a half check against that one because there's a different direction with that and it's not going to be on this property. So that's kind of been determined. Talked about development of a TIF program, and Judy's working on that. And that's something we're going to be talking about after on this next agenda item. We talked about, and Todd, jump in anytime you want here. We talked about where are we going to go for marketing with the property? Because like he said, really believes we really got to get this marketed out there. Not only, we talked about face-to-face contact with developers, if we go to one or two developers and they're too busy for us, what are we going to do in the future for really marketing the site? Is it to get a KW or a Bomir or, local realtors to market the property again, which to my understanding has been done. Obviously something hasn't come out of that yet, but, it is imperative to keep marketing out there. Not only that, but other city property with everything. So whether we're going to contract that out or whether we're going to take an approach internally to do that, we need to decide how we're going to market our properties. Interesting in the conversation, we talked about urban planner, and I'm basically just repeating what you said last week. But again, we want to kind of reiterate these things. Do we look at creating a plan with an urban planner for the site instead of going to a developer and go, hey, here's a piece of property, tell us what you want to do with it. Do we go to that urban planner and do we make up a plan for the property so that the developer knows that, hey, this is something that this committee is kind of already blessed, and this is one thing that we want to rock and roll with. So that's one less step a developer has to do to kind of come up with the ideas and plans. They can look at a potential project and go, oh, that's something the city wants. Hey, that's something I can work on. Housing we talked about, number 5, I think we've determined that we don't want to be, we want quality housing down there. We made the comments about they don't make riverfront property anymore. So we talked about quality housing. I don't know if I want to go through, every single bullet point, but I think Todd is kind of reading through these again and absorbing it a little bit last night. There are things in here that are, some building blocks of what he's come up with. And one of the things that he's fulfilled in his agreement to kind of give us some ideas. So kind of a nutshell with that. I mean, there's no golden ticket out there that's going to say we're going to do this, but I think we got to come up as a committee where we're going to move forward. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that was, I mean, to my mind, the contract was essentially up last time with the final report. I did present that. I think one of the things that the mayor asked was if I could help come up with a list of urban planners, and I've got a list that's handwritten right now, but I can get it in an email format to Chad. There's a list of some planners that I've worked with and some that I'm just familiar with, and a couple that were referred by some other people that I know. So I can get you that list if you choose to go down that route. And so that's really, I guess, kind of, I think that was my reason for coming back, was just to kind of put a bow on that and wrap that up, unless there was anything else that the committee or council wanted me to do.
We had talked about a list of developers to contact and so forth.
That-
Where are we at with that?
Yep. So there was a list that he shared with us, and I had our staff update. Remember you talked about the phone numbers and everything? So our staff did update the phone numbers for the contacts that Lou had on that list, but there's a good list now that Todd has given us that of developers and options that we can start, going down and making contact and see what trickles out from all that.
Yeah, and so then I think the next step is, now that you have that list, and it could even be developed further, but who, somebody now has to start making those contacts and, doing that kind of legwork kind of stuff. And it's like we've talked about before, is that it's almost it's a sort of a tedious it's a sales, job, it's just cold calling essentially, that you got to keep your name out there in front of these people because they're busy. They're like, I talked to SC Swendersky, which was one of the people that, was brought up, and I think Chad brought them up and showed. And when I talked to them, they were interested, but they were talking about, it might be like a 2023 project for them because of everything that they've got going on. So now it's you have to stay in front of them and in front of everybody because maybe something falls through, maybe they get more aggressive about doing other things. Maybe all of a sudden they've got a new interest in this, but I think it's a matter of. And one of the things that Chad and I talked about last night, I get every Monday, I get an email from the Sheboygan County Economic Development Group and from the Door County Economic Development Group talking about different projects that are going on, different opportunities. And it's almost like that constant drip somebody has to be doing that. And whether that's internally that you're doing or whether it's a third party that's doing that on your behalf. To just keep that out there to all these contacts and to keep adding in some new developers,
We had talked about some local ones like Randy Retzloff and so forth, that we should at least sit down with some of these people and say, are you interested in a future project? Maybe it is 2023, but at least we get them on board.
Yep. And the one interesting thing that Todd mentioned last night is even if we start doing a lot of this stuff in-house, if we don't say we come up with a developer and we find a developer and we just need help working with that developer a little bit, that's something maybe Todd can work on as a consultant. If we need help creating the developer's agreement, if there's something that needs to be worked on and, we need some extra little help creating that, or, I'm assuming you could be a resource for that in the future as well.
Yeah, and I think you can also reach out to some other community, City of Oshkosh or Menasha or any, other larger communities that do more of that as well. I'm sure they'd be willing to share some of their development agreements with you. But I think how that came up was Chad said, what would be, I think the comment was, what would be your role going forward if you were, if we just found a developer that we wanted to work with, why, what would you have to do? And quite honestly, I think probably the hardest part is to find the developer, right? If you find another developer that's willing to just go ahead and take the project, there really isn't much more that's needed from somebody like me. I mean, they're just going to do it. Other than the fact that somebody, either internally or third party, has to also then negotiate with that developer all the terms of their agreement, right? There's got to be some sort of an agreement that says, okay, you're going to do X. And we're going to provide you with Y, but we're not going to provide you with Y until you get done with X or until you meet certain benchmarks, right? So all those benchmarks have to be laid out in a development agreement. And then somebody also has to follow up to make sure that those benchmarks are met before you just go out and give the money. I think we talked about, City of Ripon a few years ago got in trouble. And the communities you'll hear about, you read about those in the paper, right? Where they end up giving away the store before anything even gets put, shovel one goes in the ground. So you have to, protect yourself somehow through that development agreement. And then you also have to follow through to make sure all those mile markers are met. And at the end, there's a certificate of occupancy and things are moved in. And then at that point, they get their final tip payment or whatever thing the city is providing. So that's one scenario, where you have a developer like that. I think we talked about another scenario is where it might be a smaller one that needs, maybe they're a great builder, but they don't know how to put the whole rest of the package together, right? The financing, the land assembly, maybe they just don't even have the financial wherewithal to guarantee the loans that are necessary for construction financing and things like that. And maybe they need a partner in that situation. And in that case, maybe I'm a partner in that potentially, or somebody else is a partner in that situation with that smaller developer to help assemble the land, put together the total pro forma for that development package and then take it to the lenders to get the financing and then provide the guarantees to do the deal. So that would be sort of a second scenario. There's the first one with a large, like SC Swiderski, that can do it on their own. There's a scenario where there might be a smaller entity that needs a little help. And then the third scenario that we talked about that was actually brought up quite a while ago by the city here was, well, what if we, and this has, I've seen this done in other communities where, what if we got a piece of property and we've been marketing it, we just can't get anybody, but we just know that this can work, right? The city knows, but we have to prove it to the outside parties. Well, there's times when the city will actually do the development themselves, you know? They're the ones that are putting up the first 4 houses in a condominium development, you know, to show how it might potentially work. And obviously, you're not building it yourself. You're still hiring a builder. But you're providing you're essentially the financial guarantor on that particular project. So that would be a third alternative, probably one that's definitely the one that has the most risk, and probably the one that is least interesting, but also a potential possibility. So, and obviously in that third scenario, you need a lot more assistance than the other 2. So those are the 3 ways that I could see it.
So I guess moving forward, I guess my recommendation would be number 1, we're looking at some of these items that Todd talked about. Judy's gonna be presenting TIF guidelines in a little bit. That's one step of this whole process that we determined that we need to look at. And I think the other step is, I mean, just the role that the city administrator takes, and finalizing the city administrator and whoever that is, you know, is going to start solidifying the process and trying to get the process organized and get it going for marketing that site. So those are kind of a couple things that we need to do internally yet before we can get back on the game and, you know, get back on that horse and start marketing the site. So,
And just so you know, the city has been in situations where we've monitored contracts in the past and made sure that developers have met their side of the contractual obligation prior to payment. A lot of times what would happen is I'm the payer for the city, so I would hold those contracts and I would know what has to be paid next. And anytime that I would release those funds, I would get with the city administrator, would be the one who would tell me, has that obligation been met? So a lot of these things are done by more than one staff person. So you have a lot of people saying, and then just like occupancy. We're looking at a full-time building inspector, that would be their position to make sure that, even as part of the contract, okay, you're supposed to have X amount of development up by a certain date. I would be in contact constantly with that building inspector, like I was with Paul when he worked there, and I would say, are they fulfilling their obligation? Are you out there checking on them, making sure they're doing what the contract says they should do? So it's a lot of people within the organization who need to get together to make sure these obligations are not just one individual.
Very good. All right. Other questions for Todd? Comments? Well, we have the recommendation from Chad. Basically, we're moving ahead with a few of these items, but one of the big things, we need to get the city administrator in place and so forth, and give that person a chance to think about this, kind of organize this, and get us headed in the right direction. So I'd see this being brought back, this discussion being brought back then next month to continue on with hopefully the new city administrator as to where we go from here and how we go about doing it. And what I hear from you, Todd, is that you're kind of on standby, you'd be willing to help us out in certain situations and so forth. Is that right?
Yep.
So,
That's correct.
Tell them only if they spell your last name correctly.
Yeah, they still have that wrong up there. Still got the N in there. Thanks, Fred.
Just a copy and paste from the previous
Petty,
month.
petty, you know.
All right, any other questions or comments?
Thank you for all you've done,
Yeah,
Todd.
thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Todd.
Thanks for having me around. Appreciate it.
You've really helped
Thank
us
you.
move forward and
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda, act on the proposed defining TIF guidelines. Judy, I assume you're leading us?
Easier if I came in here than sit at my desk and try to talk to you.
Good to see
So,
you.
I'm sorry, did you have a comment?
No, I just said, good to see you.
Thank you. So what I was tasked with doing was putting together some TIF guidelines. And so what I did is I got a hold of Phil Cossin and I had him send me a number of TIF guidelines and policies from I think there are 4 or 6 organizations. And I read through them. And as I was doing this, what was most on my mind is something that is going to allow us to be flexible. Because as we know, any project that comes into our downtown is going to be unique. So anything's going to differ from the next that differs from the next. And we don't want to continuously be going back to the policy to change so that we can accommodate someone. We want this process to be easy so that when a developer comes in, we can get their application and we can move forward as a committee. So I'm hoping all of you had a chance to read this because I don't want to go verbatim by verbatim because the mayor, Dave, Chad, and myself did sit down and we spent over an hour going through the policy itself and making changes. So I just want to highlight a number of the items on the guidelines. And then if anybody has a particular question, I'd be glad to take that, or we can all, the committee that met, we can all talk about it. But the purpose of this in the beginning is just to provide general direction. So each development and area and project is unique and should be considered on a case-by-case basis. So we don't want to say, you know, this person is doing that, that's person, then nope, we look at this project and what is it going to bring to the community, and this project and what is it going to bring to the community. So we want to consider all projects and we want to be non-restrictive about what we're thinking about when we're looking at that project. So our objectives are to stimulate and continued revitalization of both the city and the downtown. Okay, so we want to promote efficient use of our land, strengthen the economic base, stabilize and upgrade targeted neighborhoods, create and retain family supporting jobs in the city, increase property values and tax revenues. Obviously, for any development, that's our ultimate goal, is to be able to increase our tax base and leveraging the maximum amount of non-city funds into the development. So the implementation process, which is our next highlight, this will be done, city staff is responsible for this. So city staff with the direction of the council and the mayor. So we would be doing the work, but you would be the ones telling us, yep, that's right, or, you know, no, we don't want to do that. So guided by the council, and so the common council and the mayor shall have the final authority of yes or no. So we're in the background doing all, and then bringing things forward, and then you guys decide as a committee, do we want to move forward or we don't. For financing, we're going to say the city is going to use a pay-as-you-go TIF district. So this helps us reduce our financial exposure. As we all know, we have a certain debt capacity, and if we're using that for development, then we're not be able to use it for infrastructure. So we have to kind of work with, and we're looking at the TIF district to help pay for this. So 2 totally different funding mechanisms. So we're looking for the increase of value of that TIF district to pay for the development within it. And then our infrastructure is more of a tax levy dollars coming in. So 2 different types of revenue source there. So our main objective is a pay as you go. So as the development grows, money comes in, and then you're able to pay the developer as you go. If that makes sense. Okay. The city will retain a portion of the tax increment to pay for administrative costs.
So anybody within the city who is working towards that development, spending their time, I would be spending a lot of time working on the development of that TIF district and then making sure all the proper state reports are being filed. Chad would have some input into that, the downtown project. Any of those hours we keep track of, and then we charge them to the district. And then those come out of also the pay-as-you-go TID district. So we could take some of our salaries and actually those years be paid through the TID district instead of through the tax levy. Applying for the TIF assistance. Now we were when we talked about this as a group, what we want this to be is simple and simplistic. And I do have a copy of application on my desk, and I do want to get through that, but Chad and I'll probably work together on simplifying the process. But we don't want a developer to come in here, say it's, Joe Schmo working down the street, and we don't want it to be 7 pages long and they're looking at it like, I don't even know what that word means. So first of all, I would definitely offer my assistance to anybody that came in the door. I'd sit side by side with them, but then go through, this doesn't even pertain to you, this doesn't even pertain to you, but try to make that process as simple as possible, because we don't want to put up roadblocks. We want them to come in and give us ideas, and we want to move forward with projects. We don't want to say, stop them at the door just because you hand them a 7-page application and then they get to their car and they're like, heck no, I don't have time for this and I have other things to do. So I'm going to make sure that process is very simple for them. So the actual TIF process, so I got that this was the most important. So there'll be a pre-application meeting is held between the developer and the city. The developer would submit the TIF request. So that's the application process I'm talking about. So we would help them through the application process, and then we would meet with them. Okay. And the city will determine the completeness of the request and whether the project is eligible under these guidelines. And it's wide open. So we tried not to also restrict the guidelines so that we're telling people no before we even listen to them. So an analysis of the TIP plan and financial performance will be conducted by outside consultants. So anytime we're talking about putting a TIP development within the city, Phil Casson and myself, along with whomever the city administrator is at that time, we would get together and we talk about, okay, what does this project look like? How much infrastructure are we going to build and how quickly? And then what does the money flowing into the TIF district look like? So, and then how can we pay it out? So that's the TIF or the financial process of it all. So that would be us looking at it. Is this going to make sense to the city? Is there enough infrastructure being built fast enough? And then what does that look like for a payback to that developer as we go through time? And that's going to say yes or no. A lot of things are going to say yes or no at this point. Does this make sense? Or you begin to negotiate. Again, we're not here to say no, no, no. We want something to happen. So, okay, this doesn't look like it's going to work, but maybe with all of the knowledge through the years of, especially Phil and myself and Chad, what else could we do to make this work? So don't close doors, but try to think outside the box at that point. So then Common Council meets in closed session. You guys discuss the project, okay? And you have to realize at this time, the purpose for this is because we want it kind of to be a keep quiet process. So we don't want to tell everybody and their brother this is going on, because then, what happens is they think it's going to happen and then we all get all kinds of comments that we don't like to hear. So then if the council chooses to move forward, then we move into the development agreement part, which was discussed already. Again, that looks like, what is the developer going to do at what stages, at what timing, and then things are not paid unless this is due. So if then, all those kinds of things walking through a contract. And I've seen those before. I'm trying to think of an example of them. I know we worked with jobs at TIOF for a while, so we had to make sure they were putting enough employees to work, and we would work through that process of payment. Wolf River Lumber was another one. When they came in, we incentivized them through paying for taxes for a while, so we had to make sure that they were moving forward within their development as we made those payments. And usually I hold tight to those developer agreements to make sure those things are being done. And then I process them through. And not like every bill for the city doesn't come through me in particular. But those kinds of developer agreements I hold tight and then make sure that things are happening or being taken care of as we move through that project. So once the agreement has been reached and the terms, I just talked about that, and then execution of the development begins between the city and developer. So I have the list of eligible types of development, ineligible types of development. The ineligible are more like, we want to make sure that if we're going to build office space, that there's people that are going to actually rent them. So you don't want somebody to build something, we don't want it sitting there empty. So we want to make sure that if somebody's going to build office, there's already people that are saying, yep, we want to relocate there, or we want to move into there, not relocate. So that's why we talk about relocation, because what happens with relocation is then you just end up with another building that's empty. So relocation of offices, retail or commercial within the city, standalone residential, which would be just one house. So we're not looking for that kind of development. And then projects inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. And that one I can't answer for you, so I don't know what the comprehensive plan is. That one is more building inspection type person than not me. So, and then we talk about eligible expenses and then TIF assistance criteria. So we want them to have some skin in the game, basically, is what number 1 says. Equity is required by the developer. So we want them to have some money and skin in the game. That those can be worked through. I know he talked about us building something up front. That would be probably the last thing that we would want to talk about or consider, because we would, as you know, if somebody has some skin in the game, they tend to make their commitment level to the city. So internal rate of return. So one of the things we're not looking to do is make people rich either. We're trying to make ends meet. So, you know, the site downtown, you think about that, it needs some infrastructure in there, some roads, normally developers, or think about the one that we helped out with by the high school. So we brought sewer and water in there so that developer could go ahead and build those homes. That's the kind of thing that this is talking about. Not building the homes for them, but making access to the parcel for them. And then an increase in taxable valuation, which is always something that we're looking for. So that lowers tax rates over time, and then draws also economic development within a city, because a lot of times that's what they're looking at when they're looking to settle into a community, is what does their tax rate look like compared to Ortonville, Clintonville. So they're making choices on those types of valuations, also on taxable valuation. So that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, good explanation. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you.
Questions for Judy or for any of us on the TIF guidelines? As Judy mentioned, Chad, Mark, myself, and Judy sat down, kind of went through this a couple of times, so we made a few revisions to it. It's been drafted from a number of other communities, so we didn't start from scratch, but kind of pulled bits and pieces from other communities and so forth. David?
Judy, have those revisions been outlined in the course of your prior presentation a moment ago?
The revisions that I made,
Yes, that Dave said the mayor and you made this afternoon,
actually we met last week.
or
Yep.
whenever it
And what
was.
I did is I brought in probably 3 or 4 policies and guidelines.
Okay,
And I made those changes, but as we sat in the room, I showed them where these were coming from. So I presented it to the smaller group where those revisions, and then we had about 2 revisions after I sent out the final one, and they were nothing big. But the city of Milton, I think, is actually where I pulled most of this from. But then there was areas that I felt like another policy was stronger, more like what we would want. And I shared that with everyone as I pulled those in. And I asked, does this make more sense to you? But as I was doing my research, I felt like these provisions made more sense for the city of New London than others.
So are these guidelines 95% complete then?
Correct.
Up to
Unless
timely-
there's some
timely,
changes
yes, but-
tonight, I would expect you to go ahead and say, at this point, this is what we're going to go with. Now, like any other policy or guideline, things can be changed or reacted on if we say, but I tried to make sure that we had lots of movement within here, that we weren't restricting ourselves so that we weren't continuously trying to make those kind of changes.
Flexibility, the word, the
Correct, there
term
you
you
go.
used as you began.
Yes,
See, I was paying attention.
correct. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Can anybody hear me? This is John.
Yes.
I just want to say, I've kind of been on the sidelines in different roles throughout the last 20 years, and I really appreciate the work you put, especially you, Judy, and then Dave and Chad and everybody reviewing it. And I really think it's a really simplistic, and I agree with your approach that we need it simple and simplistic, and we need to do as our billboard once said, is cut the red tape for potential developers. And I think that this is a big step in doing that. I really like this, and reading through it, it was, I really think you guys did a nice job with it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Very good. Appreciate it, John.
Thanks, John.
Any other comments, questions? If not, I'm looking for a recommendation to move this to the council. Fred?
I move this forward to council for approval.
Okay.
Second,
David, seconds. Any further questions, comments? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Very good. Thank you, Judy.
You're welcome.
Very nice job, Judy. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next, discuss incentives.
Hey, Judy, you might want to stay for this one too, because we're just talking about incentives for businesses. It might be a good thing to, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Thank you.
Oh, no? Okay. Well, she just said it didn't have,
I'd be interested to hear some of the contracts that have been done in the past with T-off and,
We gotta find another Kapitsky to open a grocery store.
oh, yeah.
We had Mayford, we had Elmer, and, yeah.
there you go.
April, I'll just give you a little side note on those comments. Those were within TIF districts. So that's what helped incentivize.
Got it. Okay, so obviously COVID is wreaking havoc on our business community, and I think it's important to still keep the business development in the forefront. And when I initially had this conversation, I think I had it with Mayor Mark and Chad, I was thinking there's got to be all kinds of different packages of tax breaks or grants or loan options that we can use to incentivize businesses to relocate and encourage businesses to come to our area. But after doing some research, I found that there's not very many cities or municipalities that actually do that. And those that have done this sort of thing, it's failed. So what I did look at is there's actually programs and initiatives that promote work development and support business recruitment while building retention through community culture. So there was a laundry list of things, and I kind of took what I thought really pertained to New London. And those are all going to be found on the left-hand side. And I think we're doing a lot of these things, but what I'd like to discuss with the committee is there something that we can be doing more or in addition to these things? So the first two kind of go hand in hand, and it's something that we're already offering to our businesses or entrepreneurs with our business guide. We're providing them with those resources and tools and trying to help them secure capital. But is there anything else that we could be doing more of? I think I've had this conversation with Bill before and with you, Dave. Are we able to create that one-stop shop for businesses who are looking to come to New London and support them, not only to set up, but also to remain sustainable in New London? The second is to focus on the local growth and investment and pay attention to the businesses that are bringing revenue into the community and to connect with them. The quote on the right-hand side there is a direct quote from Dave Thiel from the county. He stated that in 30 years of working in economic development, he doesn't know one manufacturing business that was recruited to Northeast Wisconsin. Every expansion or relocation came because an owner had a connection in the area, they were vacationing here, or there was another company here. So I think that is just a testament of how important it is to stay connected to our businesses, especially the ones that are doing really great, and to connect with them and find out what their needs are and make sure that they're met. The next is build and showcase your small wins. And I think one word there, case example, I think the city has the perfect person that is able to kind of share our wins and our story. The next is know your community's culture. So how is the city or the community described by people on the outside looking in? Or if we walked into a business right now and we asked them, what do you think about doing business in New London? I think that our businesses are going to be our strongest recruiters. And that kind of goes back to that other testament there, that other businesses typically come to the area based on feedback from current businesses. So I think it's important to come up with some sort of elevator speech and stick with that and make sure that the entire community is aware of what we're doing and how we feel about the community. Keep young talent from leaving. Businesses want to invest in cities that have young workforce. So I think that's just food for thought when we're thinking about what we're developing in the city of New London. The last one is have a dashboard, and I think that just goes to our what we're portraying on our chamber and city website. Do we have updated information about our school graduation rates, our population, things that are going to attract investments, and also keep our citizens and our decision makers mindful of where improvements are needed. So I don't know, I guess I kind of wanted to just open up a discussion based on these things. Are there things or programs that we could implement to be connecting with our businesses better?
And a couple of points here. For example, communicating with our businesses. That was one of the charges that we had for our previous city administrators, was to actually go out, sit down with the various businesses and talk to them about how things are going, what recommendations they had for improving business community or climate here in New London, et cetera. And so this is something that I'd see as a high charge for our new city administrators, is that we make sure that happens. It kind of fell by the wayside on the sometimes on the previous one. There was other more important things to do always, and so that we didn't, I don't think, made the contacts with the businesses that we should have been making. So to me, it's something we've been tried to do in the past, but we got to just make sure we're successful at in the future as one of the items there. Other comments?
Dave, this is John. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I ditto what you just said. I totally agree. But I remember looking back on the committees, this committee, economic development for one, and the question that came up, at least, it was guaranteed. I used to bet the people in the office that you would say it at least once, if not twice, during a meeting, and I always appreciated that. And in fact, I wrote it on the wall in my invention shop where I create lures. But the one question you ask, and I think a lot of us should be asking all the time when we individually meet business owners, you've always asked that question, quote, is there anything this committee can do for you? And I miss hearing that. And I think that is what April's tapping into with what she's saying. But I really just think that April's on the right wavelength with Dave. What Dave Thiel said is they have to look within the businesses here that are maybe on the cusp of expansion and whatnot. But having that attitude of, is there anything we can do? You know, everybody's got a complaint, especially nowadays. You know, people can find them it's just second nature now to find a complaint, oh, this is, why is this, that, and that? But very few people, they almost are taken back when they get asked, is there anything we can do to help you? And we might not be able to, but at least we asked. And I think that's, I don't know if I'm rambling on here, but I just miss that question in this committee a lot. And I think that you just chimed in on that again.
John, I started doing my downtown visits on North Water Street, and that's the question that I ask. Is there anything that, the city of New London that I can bring back to the city of New London or the chamber can do for you? And just on North Water Street, I had 2 businesses confide in me that they're considering relocating in the next couple of years due to parking. So that's obviously an issue. And I know that's been an ongoing issue for businesses downtown, but we may not be able to fix it in the next year or 2, but it doesn't mean that we can't bring it up in conversation to see if it's something that we can work on in the future.
And it should definitely be discussed as we are going through downtown in 2024. Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
something I shared, but they were both like, I don't know if we can.
I know I met with
Hold on.
April last week too, and on discussion, I brought up maybe considering a small business committee. 5 or 6 small business owners to get together and talk to each other, find out their do's and don'ts, what this one may be having success where this one's struggling. Well, why, how can we help each other? Disperse that out through the community of different businesses. And I know April came back and I thought it was the
Downtown revitalization subcommittee.
okay, I was gonna say the chamber networking committee.
Oh, it was the downtown subcommittee. So something very similar. We started in 2018, and the first thing we did is we sent a survey downtown and asked all the business owners, what do you like about your business? What don't you like about your business? Gathered all that information, and right now we're working with the city to see how we can support that 2024 project and how we can support the businesses and make sure that they are first communication number 1, and how we're going to support them through it.
So I mean, that's a thought. We, like I said, she's got that role, and we can get more involved. Or we
And
roll out a different committee and get some stuff too.
Another idea is have like a breakfast, invite a number of the local business. Utility used to do this every once in a while. I don't know if they still do or not.
Yeah.
But they would have a breakfast and invite a number of the businesses, their key customers, to that breakfast. And maybe we could try something like that, is having a breakfast or something, inviting a number of businesses, have a number of topics that we would like to discuss with them, get their input,
I like
and so
that
forth. So,
on one more thing, on the flip side of that whole discussion, and sometimes asking that question is, what can the city do for you, or what can this committee do for you? The flip side of that is that opens up the door, and I know April probably sees this firsthand, is what can all of us, or what can each business do for the city, and what can we do? I mean, I could sit here all day long and say, poor me, I'm just a little concession stand next to a boat landing. But one of the things you can do is get out and try to make your place look a little better. Everybody at this point in the world, you maybe JFK was before some of your times, probably April, but the rest of you remember when he said, ask not what you can do or what your country can do for you, but what, you can do for your country. And we're kind of at that point. There's a flip coin to every question. And so I know that there's a lot of really strong business support within the chamber, and April knows who those players are. But even the little of us, the smallest of us, the little moles like me, can ask ourselves that question: what can we do? How can we, even if it's loaning somebody something, or it's kind of, we're really going to get to that time, folks, where we got to look at the flip side of that coin and not really ask people, what can you do for this committee? But by asking them that simple question, what can we do for you? We're here for you. That gets their mind. They might go home that night or 2 nights later and think, well, here's what I can do for them because they gave me the time to listen to me. And so you start this big snowball rolling of everybody working for each other. And I think that we're definitely on the right conversation path just by April saying, hey, what can we do for the current businesses here and what can we do to attract people? Because you know what? People get attracted to groups that work like that. You know, back in that, when Todd Hutchison talked to us back in August, what can we do to seem or to be more cohesive as a community? That's a big part of that marketing and developing or marketing and attracting developers too. People sense it, you know, just like middle school, you sense when you approach a group, how they treat you or how they don't treat you, you know? So I guess I'll get off that. I talked too long. I'm like Bill back in the 90s. I heard my own voice and I got to learn to shut up.
Okay, thanks, John. Seeing Scott sitting in the back here reminds me that I think another effort that we have to think about is getting more in touch with our young folks and finding out their interests or how we can keep them in New London, because we're losing so many young folks that they're unfortunately moving out of New London. So we're losing workforce and so forth. Is somehow we have to tap into that to the young folks, young people, try to convince them to stay here in New London or whatever.
I think one of the things that would be a really positive move at this point would be to put a couple of high schoolers on the 2024 downtown project, because there could be something as simple as a plug-in for a cell phone that would make that downtown very accommodating to them. And they would think very much of a small thing that we could do, and they think differently than we outside a box.
That's very true.
So
I like that
bringing
idea.
in a couple of high schoolers to put their 2 cents into what that downtown looks like. Because as we know, you don't only do that every 30 years. So it's going to look like that until the next time, the teenagers maybe they won't need roads anymore. I'm not sure, but whatever that looks like. And I don't know because I'm old. But.
So I like what you had said and kind of spinning off of what John had said also about the downtown project is I think we should start working with and get the information out there, what's going on downtown. I mean, we're talking about a central deal now. But I don't think the businesses down there know what the project is coming at them, and as far as like John talked about is making your storefront look attractive to bring in more people. You look at the businesses down there that are thriving, they're the businesses that are inviting. And if they know that, soon to be, we're gonna rip up the road, redo things, their projected interest might be remodeling their storefront at that same given time instead of doing it next year, supposedly, to work with them a little bit more and show them what's happening in the near future. Maybe we can put a pamphlet together and get it out to them, or go visit with each one of them, or however we lay it out. But yeah, I think John was right on with that as well.
Fred?
I'll tell everybody here something, and since I've been on the council, probably it's the 5th time I've heard it. They're probably one of the nicest looking businesses downtown, TV Plants. Once again, there's junk in the alley in the back. He can't come in with his trailer to bring back, after he delivers a new appliance, bring back the old one, which a guy picks up twice a week, twice a month, twice a week. So he doesn't have much junk in the back next to the store, old appliances. But again, his friend next door, there's some more junk cars there and some other garbage sitting in there. last week. I know we don't have a building inspector, but we got a police department. There has to be some kind of violation or letting debris sit there
They've been down
and
there.
having junk cars there.
They've
I
been
mean,
down
this is
there.
getting really, it makes me mad. Thank God Paul's a little calmer than I am. But
Jenna's stopped down there a few times and talked to him.
so if we want to attract businesses downtown, I would think they want to have clean neighbors. It's kind of important.
They're suggesting cleaning up the downtown. Eye appeal, curb appeal.
Send one of the police department over and look it over.
You just said Jeff was
Yeah,
been,
Jenna's been down there to talk to him.
so, yeah, the police department has gone there. I don't know what the results have been from that, but
The last time I heard he was compliant, so.
Warnings doesn't do a darn thing, you know.
I have a couple
Can I
things.
just say, can I just say one more thing, on what Judy and, Mark just said about the downtown project? You know, we really have an opportunity, like both Mayor Mark and Judy said, to maybe reach out to those business owners, communicate about the upcoming project, because I think, like Mayor Mark said, some of them don't realize the scope of it. And maybe we can get some input from some of those millennials or what they'd like to see. You know, for example, a long time ago, I thought, you know what? Someday cell phone parks are going to be a thing. And I was really one of the generation that was really sad to see phone booths go away. And to be honest with you, long story short, I'm building a houseboat, and I thought as a unique concept, rather than build something like the traditional big building on there, I've been shopping on the internet for phone booths. And they are extremely hard to find, and they're quite expensive. But in the process, I talked with several millennials, and they were like, "Why are you looking for phone booths?" And I'm like, "Well, it's a really crazy houseboat concept, but it would be modified where you would just be able to plug, like what Judy said, your cell phone in, a place to get out of the rain, get away from the noise of the streets, and whatever, Wi-Fi." And that's the kind of thing that's a little bit outside of the box for us, but we could be thinking about is different things like that might be a concept that catches on, you know, with our millennial generation. But enough said, I'm done talking.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry.
Okay, I think in interest of moving on here, let's continue this discussion at future meetings. Give it all some thought. I think April's raised some good issues here for us to think about and so forth. And if you come back with some concrete proposals of steps that we can take, we kind of brainstormed some of them already tonight. But let's continue the discussion, I say, at a future meeting. So, all right, let's move on. Number 8, review community feedback regarding upcoming community grocery store closing. Who is that?
Should change upcoming to past.
Well, there's been, again, this was something that April's seen, Chad's seen, I've seen myself throughout the community, via Facebook, here and out in the community, talking with people. Piggly Wiggly is closed. We've heard a lot of pushback that, you know, you need to bring in another grocery store. You need to do this. You need to do that. We want retail. I think it's the time for us to sit and actively seek out different venues, whether that be just like the gentleman that talked about food venues. We've learned a little bit of what our area would be interested in, and I think it'd be time to try and seek a little bit of that out, whether it be the grocery store, an eatery, or all of the above. I just, with this line item, my concept was to get the ball started for communication of future businesses and growth in that aspect. And maybe we can start reaching out to some somehow.
Are you suggesting, for example, a Culver's, that maybe we identify a certain type of store
Exactly.
and go after it?
Just like the gentleman said there with what the paperwork we were given, we can identify some of the identities that would work good in our community. So let's seek them out. Maybe now's not the time, maybe we're in the wrong, but we don't know unless we go ask them. I've started looking at several different stores in general, and they all seem to have a common goal, or not a goal, but a startup process. And it's a sheet of paper that you check off of if you meet the criteria. If you do, then you email them or call them and start the conversation.
We should, here, Mark, once again, in London, we got another monopoly. And it irritates me as much as some of the things I've heard from people. And I think we should aggressively go after whoever we can find, somebody with a Century agency, if not all these, or somebody. Because the boys over there, they're living the high life in London, they're probably those two on the bottom. I want to report, and pricing there is as I've seen compared to other places. And me, I'm a one-person consumer.
I don't necessarily know that we're looking to go out there and create, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. Competition.
Why not?
But we're definitely out there to create growth in our community.
As you bring business, it'll force competition.
Right.
Whatever business you bring in, if you bring in a Culver's, say that's what we want to go for. You bring in a Culver's, that's going to bring in more people. Every time you bring in more people, there'll be another business to open up, and you will create competition.
You don't understand economics. No, that's not how economics work.
Well, I get what you're saying, and essentially saying that too, but that's not the main focus.
It'll bring more traffic, yes.
Of creating, that's not our main focus here, is to create that, but our main focus is to grow our city.
Our focus is not to worry about what business we bring in. If it creates competition, that's great. We just need to bring stuff in. If all these, that'd be perfect.
And with what the community is stirring up, I think we're on track, and that's what the direction we should head. So I thought I'd bring it up to the committee and find out some thoughts. Is there any one place we want to go? Is there people that want to start calling them? Is that a direction we want to go? April, you got
I
any?
think it would be helpful to look at that market study that Todd was talking about. See if we can gain some knowledge there. And I know we're hearing from citizens, the Facebook messages that we're all receiving on what some of the citizens are hoping to see. Lay out a list and discuss it as a committee, and then decide who we should try to recruit. I don't know if you received the information that I sent you through fax, all the information on that building.
I did
Check your
not.
email.
No.
Other suggestions?
I do know that Pete has really tried to recruit other grocers, even outside of the Piggly Wiggly family, very hard. And now we have another building that's available downtown, or the family video building. And I know, just in wishful thinking, I've talked, and I think I sent an email to April and Chad and said, wouldn't it be nice to have given the COVID situation, there's just been a huge demand for anything outdoor, quiet sports, bicycling, kayaks, anything of the sort. You can't find boat parts, can't find boats. It's very difficult. But I see a resurgence in that type of business. And then the other thing we got to think about, even when you're talking about attracting like a Culver's or any of those places, is that bypass that's going to get built. And it's now going to take those folks from Greenville, which is a huge bedroom community, that may not want to go right next door into Grand Chute or Appleton. It's going to be like an 8-minute drive or a 12-minute drive at most from Greenville to New London when the bypass is built. And that's going to change our community huge. We're the place that people want to move to. And now the highway, when it gets done, it's going to be even better for us. And so we got to think outside of what we've been used to since the 70s. We got to think really broad about that. And when we think about the types of businesses we want to try to go after, and we have to present it in a way that is futuristic thinking that way, you know, that's basically that's it on that.
Okay, any other thoughts? Well, again, this is something I think that maybe table for now. Give us some thought, future. They will continue the discussion in the future, and because it kind of ties in with some of these other things we've been talking about. Once we get the new city administrator on board, I'm sure you'll have some ideas as well. All right, next updates and reports, business, April.
I just want to share with the committee that I have started my my downtown businesses on North Water Street and Pearl Street. They are going well. Reporting the 2 closings that everyone is aware of, Piggly Wiggly and Family Video. Piggly Wiggly is an 18,000 square foot building, and it's priced at $995,000 with opportunity to expand to the north. I do have that information in my office if anyone is inquiring. Family Video, I've also been in contact with that realtor. They have lease or small office space from anywhere from 1,500 square feet up to the entire building, which is 17,000 square feet, and the asking price is $899,000. I've been in contact with someone who has in the very end stages of closing on a commercial building downtown. He purchased the former Passing Time 2. He has some hopes to hopefully open up a salon there. And then the purchase for the former buyer's guide on North Water Street finally went through. The Wagners purchased that and they plan to put in some office space. As far as relocations, the Bridge store, which is connected to our shelter, which was located on Shawano Street right across from the chamber, has relocated to the former Safe Half building, and they actually open back up tomorrow. So this new building has allowed them to expand and ultimately bring in more funds for the shelter. And then Larson Insurance also went over there. Larson's Insurance Agency, which was on the other side of town, moved over into that strip. So now that strip into Zach Zabel's office. So that strip is full again. That's all I have on business updates.
Good. Thank you. Any questions for April?
Did you say you moved into the old Press Star building? What is that?
The Wagners purchased it and they are fixing it up right now, and they want to do office space and do some expanding on a current business.
Any other questions for April? Okay, thanks, April. The status of the downtown facade building, is that you, Jack?
Yep. In your packet, there was a memo just kind of talk about the small business grant, or sorry, the facade building improvement grant program we did. Because the committee did the small business COVID grant program, it did take quite a bit out of that funding. But I'm not going to go verbatim, but we had 4 different businesses take advantage of the facade program this year. I have them on the screen. So we spent a little over $9,000 in the facade program this year. We are closing it off just because of the small business grant program that pretty much depleted the fund. So we're pretty much done for it this year. And depending on how we work on the budget next year, we'll see from there. But I just want to give you an update of what businesses took advantage of it. And
Can businesses take advantage of that every year, or is there like a grace period where they have to kick off?
There, don't quote me, I think it was every 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
It's on that form. It's on the application explaining that.
Okay.
Very good. A couple of points. Again, this ties right in with some of the comments that we heard earlier, that we've got to clean up the downtown, make it more user better looking, so forth. The other question is, in the budget for 2021, did we put some money in for this?
I believe Judy put money into it based on like the carryovers from the previous year. I think that's where it kind of came from. Okay. So we're meeting in a couple of days to kind of talk about that. So we'll figure out what we can do for 2021. Right.
Correct. That is, yep, I'm here. So that is how most of those dollars did get placed in economic development, was through overages or underage under in revenue or over in revenue and under in expense from year to year. So we'll take a look at it as we close out the 2021 and try to get some funds back in there.
Very good. Thank you, Judy.
You're
Oh,
welcome.
lost you there for a minute.
I'm here.
Still here. Okay, good. All right, any questions for Chad? If not, item number 10, select activities and speakers for future meetings. I think we already identified a number of carryover topics, unless you folks have somebody that you really want to bring in or a topic you really want to discuss.
I could also give you an update on that downtown subcommittee. We meet bi-monthly, so that could be on there as well.
Yes, please give us.
No, on the agenda for next,
Oh,
I'm
on
saying
the
for
agenda,
future.
okay.
No, I won't keep you
Yeah,
guys here
future
long.
stuff.
Oh, future stuff. Okay, good. All right, very good. So no other comments there? Public comments? Yes, go ahead.
Gerald Migalski. Want to get back to the closing of the Piggly Wiggly store. If you know it or not, but next to Walmart, there's property for sale next to it and all front. Maybe they'd be interested in putting in a neighborhood market. Just an idea, suggestion. I mean, we know they have the resources, and we could use another grocery store in this town, and clothing stores, and shoe stores, so on. Wife and I talked it over, and that's the reason I came down here to bring it up. Somebody would maybe want to check it out, maybe contact, maybe they'd be interested. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thanks,
Scott?
Gary.
Steve, you touched on it a little bit earlier from a previous conversation. I know that this group has had high school students involved with this group in the past, and on behalf of the school district, if it is of interest, contact us, and we will definitely work with the high school principal to identify students that may be interested in downtown project and or the community exclusive.
Very good. Well,
Ready, let us know.
thank you. Appreciate that. We, in fact, Chad and I, Mayor Mark, we met with Brian this afternoon, and so we're off and running on bringing in the 2 students for this committee. 1 student for Parks and Rec, Bob Bisol is as well. And but we'd also now, I think, be looking for somebody for the downtown. We'll have to discuss that, but appreciate your offer there.
Dave, I was just gonna say, one of the things when they were talking about the Claritas information, I just wrote it down. With Casey, I don't know if the school wants to do a promotional video for the school district. I mean, just more things promoting the area. So something to keep in the back of your mind if you want to take advantage of Casey. That's something we can team up on and just start pushing these videos out, these quick little things of promote our area. So.
Very good. Okay, anything else? Move to adjourn. Second?
Second.
Okay, John seconds. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
All right, Fred.